I'd like to wish a happy Christmas to all of our supporters, allies, opponents and those who are entirely hostile to the Scottish Family Party too. It's Christmas after all, so I hope everyone has a great time over the coming week. Now at this time of year, I've traditionally made a Scottish Family Party video a little bit different from the others because during the rest of the year, I'm often speaking about values, morals, wisdom, and sometimes I'll say this is related to my beliefs as a Christian, or for Christians this comes from the teachings of their faith. I'm aware a lot of the teachings overlap with Islam, Judaism, other religions. A lot of non-religious people as well hold similar values. But I think with Christianity in particular, I think more and more people, particularly young men, I'd have to say in my experience, are becoming attracted to the values of Christianity. And they're starting to say things like, how come it seems to be that the Christians always see the problem coming first? So the sexual revolution that's led to the sort of sex, gender mayhem that we're in the midst of at the moment, who were the people at the time saying this is all going to go horribly wrong? Well, in Britain, it was Christians. And we look at assisted suicide at the moment. I mean, horrific things going on in Canada as the nation goes down the slippery slope. Who is it that offers the principled opposition to keep us off the slippery slope completely? Well, it's often the Christians. So I think there's quite a few people are starting to say, well, the Christians, they seem to be right on quite a lot of these things. But then maybe wondering, what about the rest of what they say? What about that? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today, because quite often in the Scottish Family Party, I say, I'll talk about the moral, the wisdom aspects of Christianity, but not really the other aspects. So this, once in the year, we're going to put that in context by looking at the broader picture of my religious faith, partly so to help you to understand me, and partly because I hope you'll find it interesting. Now, I think with a video like this, there's two sorts of people who would watch it. There's one sort who thinks, oh, that's interesting. I'd like to learn a bit about this. I'd like to understand what he thinks. And there's some people who think, I know exactly what I believe already, and I'm going to check he says it right. Now, this video is not really for the second sort of person. Okay, you can go and watch something else, that's fine. But if you're interested in what I think and hearing my take on a few things, then do watch. Now, I would say with the Christian faith, there are four key elements of it. And numbers 2 and 3 are quite familiar to most people. And if you said to an average person in the street, explain what Christians believe, they'd get number 2 and number 3. Number 1 and number 4, maybe not so much. So I'm going to start with number 1. What's the number 1 thing I would say the Christians believe? And that is in the Trinity. So as a Christian, when I say God, I mean Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. 3 persons make up God. 3 consciousnesses, 3 minds, 3 wills, all within God's being. So when I say God, I mean Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Now, I believe God's an all-powerful, all-knowing, morally perfect creator of the universe. Yes, that's who God is. But I believe that God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, that could be quite a funny idea to get your head around, the Trinity. This is a little illustration I find. It helps me in any case. If you imagine a little Scottish island where there are only 3 police officers, Alan, Bob, and Charlie. So Alan, Bob, and Charlie are the police on this island. So if you pick the phone up and dial the police, phone the police, you speak to someone, you're speaking to the police. You're actually speaking to Alan, Bob, or Charlie, but you're speaking to the police. If your house was broken into, you'd phone the police. Let's say Bob turns up. You'd say, oh, the police have come. The police have come to investigate. So Alan, Bob, and Charlie, they might have different jobs, but they're each equally a police officer, and they're equally part of the island police force. And Alan, Bob, and Charlie together are the police on that island. Now, all analogies break down at some point, but I just find that quite helpful, thinking about the 3 persons within one God. So why does God exist as a Trinity? It does seem quite unusual, doesn't it? Why would God exist as a Trinity? Well, I think one reason is so that God can embody love within God's own being. So there's love within God. There are relationships within God between these 3 persons. So I think on that understanding, God is complete within himself. He doesn't need to create anything in order to enjoy relationships or to engage in relationships. He's complete within himself and has relationships horizontally as well as vertically. So it's not just like the mighty distant God dealing with us mere humans. There are relationships within God as well. So when God invites us to know him, he's inviting us in effect to join an existing network of relationships. Now, another reason I believe God exists as a Trinity is in order to enact God's plan to interact with humans. But I'll talk more about that in part 3. So that's the first part, Trinity. I believe that Father, Son and Holy Spirit are God. And when I say God, I mean Father, Son and Spirit. Right, on to the second aspect of Christian faith, I would say, is creation. I believe that God created the universe and everything in it. Now, thinking about the universe, I believe that an all-powerful conscious being outside of space and time is the only credible explanation for the origin of the universe. Now, I could talk about that a lot more, but I'll leave that there. Now, thinking about alternatives to that. Now, if you believe that some sort of sequence of natural causes, one thing caused another, and that created the universe, that caused the universe to be as it is at the moment. Now, if you believe that that sequence goes back infinitely, then that leads to a problem, because infinite basically means you can never get to the end of it. So if the universe is infinitely old, or the current universe is the result of an infinite number of events, then that's just impossible, because you could never get to the present. An infinite past, an infinite regress of causes is impossible. Again, I could talk about that lots more, but let's just leave it there for now. So I believe God created the universe. I believe God created life as well, plant life, animal life, and human life. Now, each of those types of life involve massively complex systems of interrelated functional components, and I believe that systems like that don't arise by chance. Now, normally when I say to people, try and persuade me otherwise, they start persuading me about something else. For example, that all life forms are related to each other, which I don't necessarily disagree with. So again, that's another thing I believe. I'll leave that one there. There'll be lots more to say. I'll leave that one there. I also believe that humans are different than animals, and they have a soul, there's a spiritual aspect, free will, consciousness, conscience. So humans are not just a cleverer sort of animal. They've got a special place in God's creation and a special relationship to God. So I believe God places a unique value on human beings, and I believe it's not for me to overrule that. I didn't make them. They don't belong to me. So it's not my job to decide which humans are valuable or not. It's my job to value what God values, so value all human life. Right, number 3. Again, a key element of Christian faith, I would say. That's God's wisdom, God's standards, a moral system, if you like. So where does that come from? I believe we can know that through our conscience. I believe that our conscience is a God-given faculty that tells us what's right and wrong. Just direct knowledge. Quite often we don't need to think about it. We don't need to think, is that right or wrong? We just know that something's wrong or something is right. Now, our conscience, it can be ignored, it can be corrupted, it can get confused, just like our other sentences. People can misreport it. They can know actually in their heart of hearts something's wrong, but they can say, no, actually, I feel fine, I don't feel guilty at all. So if it was entirely left to our conscience, which is subjective to some degree, that would lead to problems. So we need a plumb line. We need something a bit more objective to refer to in terms of moral values. And I think that's where revelation comes in religious belief systems. In Christianity, that would be the Bible. Now, when people look at the Bible in terms of moral guidance, often people don't understand the relationship of the Old Testament to Christianity. So therefore, they get very confused about how it all works. But part of the role of the church is to present the moral teaching of the Bible for each generation, not changing it for each generation, but presenting it in a way that can be understood and appreciated by each generation. So what's it all about? God's moral standards, God's wisdom. Well, part of it is for the good of humanity, for individuals, in particular for families. So it's laying out principles that are going to help societies to flourish, individuals to flourish. But there's more to it than that. I think it also reflects God's moral perfection and therefore God's moral requirements on us. I find a helpful way to think about it is this: when we do something wrong, it's not like getting a parking ticket. It's more like parking on the traffic warden's foot. Because when we do things wrong, it hurts God. It damages our relationship with God. So these standards, these moral standards, there's truth, there's wisdom that we find in the Christian faith. I believe it's attractive to people because it resonates with people's conscience and their rationality. I mean, a lot of churches are actually embarrassed by it. They believe that God's moral teaching is actually repulsive. It will scare people away from the church, so they try and keep it secret. I think that approach is completely wrong. I think churches that are more open about it are finding that God's standards, God's moral teaching actually attracts people to it. So people think the world's going mad, what's gone wrong? And they often come to the conclusion It's as we've moved away from Christian values that our society has gone off the rails, and I would entirely agree with that point. However, it's really important to remember in the Christian faith as it's personal. None of us measure up to God's moral standards. It's not that them people over there, they're doing it all wrong, they're ignoring God's standards. It's something we all do to some extent. So to continue my analogy, it's as though we're all still parked on the traffic warden's foot. Right, the last aspect, again, this is one that people might find more difficult to explain about what Christians believe, and this is how God interacts with humanity, because I don't believe as a Christian that God is a distant God who's created the universe, looks down watching what's going on. It's like a soap opera, you know. He might approve or disapprove, but he's just basically spectating. I believe that he interacts with people, and he relates to creation, and particularly relates to people, and that's why he created humans, because he wants a relationship with them. He wants to know them, communicate with them, cooperate with them, and ultimately he wants them to move in together. Let's put it that way. And that relationship is to be freely chosen. So humans choose to enter into that relationship with God, and God's given us the capacity to make that choice, the free will and the ability to make that choice. Now, that's quite tricky to form a relationship while you're parked on someone's foot, but we'll leave that analogy for now. We'll move on from that analogy and start on a new one to try and illustrate this next point. Now, imagine you're a kid and there's a place near to your neighbour's house. You know you're not supposed to play football. You've been told a million times, don't play football there. And you do, and the ball goes through your next door neighbour's window, breaks the window. So the relationship with your neighbour is damaged. Now, if you just didn't do anything, the next time you saw your neighbour, just gave them a cheery wave and said, you know, a nice weather for the time of year or whatever, didn't say anything about the window, there was something far wrong there, wouldn't there? Something needs to be done to put things right if you've broken his window by doing something that you shouldn't have done. So what you need to do to put things right with the neighbour? Well, number one, go knock on his door and admit that it was you that broke the window. I mean, number two, you should apologise, obviously. Okay, say you're sorry. Number three, well, those first two are not really enough. I mean, he's still got a broken window, hasn't he? So you'd want to fix the window. What can I do to fix the window? And then number four, when you fix the window, you'd certainly make sure you never played football again. And you might offer to mow his lawn or buy him a box of chocolates or something, because he's been inconvenienced and hurt by this whole process. So you probably want to offer something else in addition. So that's all fine, potentially. Number three could be the tricky one, though. Let's say the neighbour says, okay, I'd like you to fix the window, obviously, as you would like to do. There's a glazier down the road. I've had one of these windows fixed before. I know how much it costs. It's £200. And you say, I haven't got £200. I'm just a kid. I haven't got £200. I can't pay. Now, the neighbour wants to restore the relationship. Now, we could just say, oh, forget about it. I'll get the window fixed. That'll be fine. But that would downplay the importance of the situation, wouldn't it? The neighbour wants you to take part in the process. So instead, what the neighbour might do is say, look, okay, you want to fix my window. I really appreciate that. I'll pay for it. Here's £200. You get my window fixed. So he does. So notice the neighbour didn't say, you can't pay, so tough. Okay, we can't restore this relationship. You're in my bad books until you pay. And he also doesn't say, oh, just forget about it. You just go on with your life. I'll deal with it. You just forget about it. The neighbour says, I'll provide you with what you need to put things right, because I know you can't provide that for yourself. Now, with a broken window, what's needed, obviously, is a new window. That is the appropriate payment. But how about if you've lived an imperfect human life? What's the appropriate payment? What's the recompense that will be needed? Well, a perfect human life. But living a perfect human life is beyond our capability. We can't provide that, so we need someone to provide it for us, and that's what God does. God provides that for us. Remember I spoke about the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit? Well, what Christians believe at Christmas, what I believe Christmas is all about, is the Son, one of the three persons of God, coming to earth embodied as a human to live that perfect human life for us. So in that way, God gives us what he demands of us. And what we have to do is to accept that gift, and that's what it means to become a Christian. So that's just one of many ways of trying to understand what's at the heart of the Christian faith, trying to explain it, trying to articulate it. Now, I could have said so much more then. I haven't finished the story by any means. I could have said a lot more, but I'll leave it there for now. You might agree or disagree with what I've said. You might have a different set of beliefs. But I hope it's been helpful to understand what's at the heart of my faith at least. Because often as a Scottish family party leader, I'm talking about Christian values, morality, standards, wisdom, and not about the other things. So just once a year, it's nice to balance things up a little bit. Now, the comments underneath this video, you're very welcome to make comments. I'm not going to interact with them. I'm not going to enter into like theological discussion on the family party social media. As I say, if you've got questions you want to understand further, then my suggestion would be go to church and meet some people there and ask them. Okay, thanks very much for watching, and I hope you have a great Christmas with your friends and family, and I look forward to seeing you in the new year. Happy Christmas.